Hey, what's up, Truck Central? My name is Matt Moorman. Welcome to my dedicated wash bay where I spend a lot of time washing, detailing, messing around with my cars and trucks. But what I'm going to do today for this channel is make a comparative video series of the Generation 1 and then Generation 2 Raptors. So I'm comparing them both from my vantage point, from a guy that drives these to Home Depot and to my office. And so I'm going to talk to you about the differences between the two, both driving, feature, feature and benefit, and what the differences are between the Generation 1 and Generation 2. I don't think it's as much of a layup as with other vehicles where you just buy the newest and latest, greatest. I mean, there are some significant pros and cons to both, so I'm going to take you through my take on those. So stay tuned and let's jump in Gen 1 and go for a drive.
All right, so this is the Gen 1 or 2013 Raptor. This has the 6.2 liter V8, which we're going to drive around the block here, or drive around my normal driving loop here in Central Florida. It's 41 degrees, so we're freezing our butts off. This truck has 49,731.4 miles on it. We're getting 12.8 miles per gallon. Now, my wife drives this truck. She loves this thing, so I'd given her this truck to drive. I drive around in the Gen 2, I guess because I'm a snob, but she doesn't care, and so she'll drive whatever, but she loves this thing. So let's go for a drive around the block and talk about driving experience and how this thing works. Now, the experience of driving this truck is a little different than the outside of the differences in motor and generation and technology. This truck drives differently because it's slightly modified. We have a RPG stage, I believe it's stage 2 rear suspension. So we have the lift blocks removed, Devers +3 leaf spring in the rear, which adds some rigidity to the rear, mainly for towing. That's the reason why my friend who modified this truck when I bought it from him at roughly 28,000 miles, I think maybe roughly 30,000 miles. We also have a leveling kit on the front where the front's about an inch higher as well, 3/4 of an inch higher. And so when you combine the aftermarket rear and then the leveling kit in the front, we have a much more stable or flatter ride in this truck. The Devers in the rear helps keep the rear end from squatting or body rolling. And so I intend to do the same modifications to my other Raptor because, again, I don't off-road these trucks. And you'll forgive me, I call me a poser or whatever you want, but I would guess there's maybe 5% of these Raptors are actually driven off-road like they should be, and those 5% guys don't give a crap about anybody else. They're just doing what they like doing. And so then the other 95% of dudes driving around the truck don't really care about doing high-speed off-roading, or if they do, it's very, very casually. And so the ones that in the comments of this video and every other Raptor video I've made that start yelling and complaining about using the truck as intended, I have a North Face jacket on, the North Face jacket that I'm not climbing mountains. I don't have my watch on, but I have an Omega Seamaster that I don't dive with. So anyway, this truck I drive around the street, and if you've never had any experience driving around, from point A to point B in a Raptor, it's really a different truck. I like to think of it as a truck for sports car guys. I'd never in my wildest dreams would have imagined I had two trucks, and then two of the same truck. I would have never considered that. It was never an option. Really, the only reason I bought this truck was to tow in style, up to the mountains. I'd been putting a lot of miles in my GT3 going up to the Carolina mountains, which is a 350 mile each way trip. And so I thought it would be nice to have a truck to tow the cars with. Obviously, this isn't the best towing vehicle, but anyway, this it gets the job done. The 6.2 liter V8 has enough horsepower and torque to tow the thing. So I haven't had any issues with with towing. Now, would a F250 or a, F350 dually diesel, Power Stroke diesel, or some sort of Duramax, would that be better for towing my car to the mountains? Yes. But loaded, my Trail X aluminum trailer with the car weighs about 5,200 pounds. So this thing tows it no sweat. It's not an issue. The only issue with Raptors is towing and the rear end squatting, and so that's why the aftermarket suspension makes a big difference. This V8, the 6.2 liter V8 is no match. Like if we did a straight line acceleration video of this versus the Generation 2, the twin turbo V6, it's absolutely no contest. That truck is so much faster. I mean, that does 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. This one's probably 6 1/4. I don't know what the specs are. I'm sure you guys could look it up. I get in this and drive this in comparison to the new truck, which we'll show here in a few on video. That this truck has no match for it, technology, comfort, but the V8, that sound, the V8 sound is so much better. So if you're into the audible experience or the auditory experience you get from driving a truck, then naturally the Gen 1 is going to do you better. Now, if you're going to get in a truck and drive to Atlanta from Orlando, then a Gen 1 is going to be, I'm sorry, the Gen 2, the new truck, is going to be a much more comfortable experience. But I've driven this thing back and forth roughly a dozen times to the mountains, and it's awesome. It's comfortable. The seats are fantastic. In general, it's a great experience. Driving wise, it drives straight. It drives comfortably. Cruising at 85 miles an hour is no sweat for this thing. So, in general, I think it's a great truck to have and drive. Even today, I think it holds up, and that's part of the reason why these trucks are still holding their value. I mean, they're selling 35 to $50,000 depending on how many miles and how well it's been treated. But like I said earlier, now 95% of these trucks are probably just driven on the road by dads like me that are just cruising around. So it's not usually not an issue with people Bajaing, jumping their trucks. But man, listen to that V8. It's so much better. So there's a solid 85, rolling on the throttle. So anyway, the sound of this. Now this truck has a slightly modified stock exhaust. It has a MagnaFlow muffler on it. I know my friend had put an full aftermarket exhaust, and it was pretty drone crazy, and so he pulled that off and went back to something more tame, which I like, especially since Michelle's driving it. And these trucks for me, although we're modifying them slightly, I like to keep it simple. I like to keep it so that I don't have any uncomfortable modifications. Because these are the things that I drive around town. And so you could do more hardcore stuff, aftermarket coilovers and things like that. But for what I'm using it for, it's just not necessary. So the driving experience of this truck, of the Generation 1 with the V8 is it's great. In many ways I prefer this, because of the sound. And the way that the suspension is set up on this truck, the handling it's flatter. But I'm driving down a narrow little backcountry road here in this big old truck, and a normal truck I'd feel like I'd be moseying around, and I'm driving 65 miles an hour, in relative short order. So the experience you have of driving a Raptor versus driving a regular truck. A regular truck just wouldn't do it for me. It just wouldn't work. I'd just be bored. And so this helps ensure that I'm able to drive a truck around and really enjoy the experience. We do have quite a bit of a tire noise. These Nittos have roughly 50,000 miles, 45,000 miles on them, so they need to be replaced. But I have Nitto Terra grapplers. I'm going to be replacing with a KO2 a 325, 65, 18. I have method NVs on this truck, and so I'll be updating the tires here soon, which will be a little quieter, a little smoother, a little more comfortable. But again, I don't think it's about comfort as much as it is just cool factor. I mean, these things, they just check all the boxes, man. I love this truck. It's part of the reason why, Michelle had a Tahoe. I got rid of her Tahoe. My wife's name is Michelle. I got rid of her Tahoe and replaced it with this. Kept this truck. The value, it'll hold the value. The 6.2 liter V8 has no issues, very, very few issues. Change the oil and just keep rolling. I mean, there are plenty of these trucks with 150, 200,000 miles on them, and no issue at all, other than dealing with the fuel economy, which, I mean, we're not driving 50,000 miles a year, so it's not a big deal for us. Now, one of the things that I really, and I'll talk more about on the next video or the next truck, the Gen 2, I much prefer this transmission. This is a 6-speed, 6-speed automatic versus a 10-speed monstrosity, which is a total mess. This is just smoother. It's more predictable. There's second gear, third gear, fourth gear. There's a smooth transition from gear to gear. You can put it in, mash the pedal to the floor and it'll downshift for you to manual mode and use the little plus and minus. This truck really doesn't do as well, in manual as the other. We don't have paddles like we do on the new truck, but generally speaking, you're going to put it in drive and you're going to drive around, and it's just, it just makes sense. And so, yes, fuel economy is an issue, but my guess is that most of the extra fuel economy is coming from the twin turbo V6, because this is a monster, large displacement V8. And so the transmission in this truck is so much better. And so if you're one to be annoyed easily by gear shifts and lots of hunting for gears, even driving around these flat roads of Central Florida, you're going to be miserable in the Gen 2. It's really bad. Now, I'll talk about this when we go jump in the other truck, but it's stupid. So sorry to you new Raptor owners who haven't owned an old Raptor, but the transmission in this, I don't give a crap about fuel economy. It just works, and it works so much better. And I don't really feel the need to use paddle shifting or anything like that. In fact, I've tried using paddle shifting in the new truck, but it's just as annoying trying to figure out what gear you're supposed to be in. But in general, this 6-speed transmission is a non-event. You don't even think about it. All you think about is the grumble or rumble of the V8, and the fact that the truck gets up and goes fast enough for a truck. The brakes on these aren't world class. They brake like they should, but they're not. It's not a massive big brake kit where you have the ability to stop the 6,000-pound monster in 100 feet. So, in general, it goes plenty fast enough for what you're hoping to accomplish, what I'm hoping to accomplish anyway. So let's pull in here and let's jump in the other truck. All right, so here we go around the block in the Gen 2 or the 2018. The steering wheel is nicer. The fit and finish of this is nicer. The dash is cheap, but it's leather. But the cockpit, this feels like I'm sitting in a 2018 versus they're sitting in a truck that was built in 2010. Because that's the technology that's on board. So let's go for a little run. Again, this is a 10-speed automatic twin turbo V6 versus the 6-speed a 6.2 liter V8. And so let's go talk a little bit about my observed differences between the two trucks. And the first thing you'll notice is the sound. Now, there's some sound piped through the speakers, just like seems like every modern turboed car. They feel like we need some additional annoying sound pumped in, but the purpose of this truck, at least this is my experience. You know, I have 1,426.1 miles. The last 520 miles, I'm averaging 14.6 miles per gallon. Again, that's me driving it. So 14.6 versus roughly 11.9. So we have an MPG difference. But the way that I drive these trucks, you know, I'm intending to use this as a thing to run to Home Depot and grab some plywood, or you know, drive around town, you know, in this, and go to my office and use it as my daily driver, tow 3 or 4 times a year with it, and use it as a utility vehicle, you know, as my, I don't like this term, but daily driver, if you will. I feel like people who say daily driver are ones that don't actually have more than one car. But anyway, that's just, that's just my guess. That's my opinion. I probably shouldn't have that. So first thing in this truck, as I go around these turns, the first thing that comes to mind is that, you know, it's quite a bit more loopy. You know, the body's rolling. I'm not as confident coming into the turn, and I'm cheating because I have the factory, you know, Baja ready soft suspension versus the Devers upgrade. And, you know, from what I understand, doing Devers in the rear and doing a slight leveling kit really doesn't affect, in fact, can improve your off-road performance. But I think a lot of it depends on what you're doing. If you're jumping the thing and you're doing really high speed, you know, Baja runs, you know, a lot of times you're going to want the softness that you get from the factory suspension. But, you know, again, for me, I'm driving this truck because I'm a sports car guy that has a semi-need for a truck, and so that's sort of where my angle, or what my take is on this. You know, I'm not towing, you know, 15,000 pounds. You know, I'm not loading up the truck with ceramic tile to go do a job. I'm just driving this thing around, and, you know, like yesterday, for instance, I bought some scaffolding for my new headquarters that I'm building, and I like to be able to throw it in the back. Now, I will say that, you know, the suspension, the way the factory suspension is set up, driving around these roads here, even though I have more body roll, I mean, it just absorbs all these little undulations in the road like it's nothing. It's so comfortable. You know, I'm tempted to just leave it as is and not mess with the suspension, but it's just so comfortable. The experience of sitting in this thing is fantastic. Even though it sounds like absolute garbage, it farts when you really shift gears. It's really a great experience to be in this thing. The other thing is, and I mentioned in the beginning of the video and talking about the 2013 and the 6-speed manual the 6-speed automatic transmission. This right now I'm going 51 miles an hour and I'm driving in 10th gear. And so this thing with all these gears, you know, 10 speeds is just stupid. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute after we, you know, kind of get around the block here. You know, the sound doesn't, you know, even though this sounds like crap, and this is something I was worried about, you know, now I had an F80 M3, 2015 M3, and that was a sports car. It was a sports sedan. It was a car that I wanted to perform. It was a car that I wanted to drive to red line often. It was a car that I really wanted to take through the gears and, you know, drive it. This, again, I'm putting around town, driving, you know, 50, 60, maybe 75 miles an hour on the highway. There's a real difference there, and so in use and how I was going to rev out the engine, and so because I'm using this for a different purpose, the twin turbo V6, if you take out the sound, you know, the power delivery, how fast this thing is, how easy it makes it to drive around town, or, you know, merge onto the highway, it's way better. So if we get over that sound, which is awful in my experience, I think it sounds like absolute garbage. Again, this turn here, this sweeping turn, I was taking at 80, now I'm taking at 65 and wobbling around here because I don't have the flatness of the leveling kit and the rear suspension upgrade. But anyway, the sound of just driving around is not to me is not a big deal. And I'm a sound guy. You know, sound is super important to me. So I'm not going to mess with the exhaust in this because I don't want to amplify the garbage sound. I don't want to hear more of it. In fact, I need to get the Forescan Ford software so that I can go in and tune out or code out the goofy, interior cabin noise that's pumped through the speakers. I need to get rid of that. And again, I want to hear less of it. But I'm not going to be doing downpipes and things like that. So I'm telling myself I'm going to leave this thing alone and drive it. So I'll be putting wheels and tires and doing this suspension upgrade, and then that's maybe a different front bumper, but that's all kind of appearance stuff and less about performance. And I know you can tune these, put a bigger exhaust on it, intake, ECU tune, and you can be making 600 horsepower, but I don't know. I don't want to mess with it, at least not now. So here we go to so there's 90 where we were doing 80 something in the other truck and doing it in much faster fashion. I mean, this is miles faster than the other truck, and the other truck gets out of its own way pretty well for a 6,000 pound thing or 6,000 pound truck. So this thing, and I'll go through the different modes in the interior video, or talking about some of the features from from my perspective or my vantage point. But this thing has all kinds of modes: sport mode, you have clay mode, all different types of driving modes that the other truck doesn't have, at least, or this truck has a lot more capability to set things and adjust things. The mode I end up driving in all the time because of the transmission is just general regular mode. So here, let's talk about that a little bit. It seems that most reviews, or just the tone that I get from what most people who don't actually own this thing that are reviewing it talk about as the 10-speed transmission, the 10-speed automatic. Well, I think the 10-speed's a hunk of crap. Because right now here, so we're in third, second. Okay, we never get down to second, it's in third. So we're just driving, third gear, that's normal. Oh, there goes fifth. What about fourth? There's sixth, seventh, ninth, and now we're in 10th, going 53 miles an hour. Generally, driving around town, the thing that annoys me about having 10 speeds, one, we're skipping all kinds of gears, so clearly we don't need them. Second, I find this thing hunting for gears all the time. Plus, it's herky-jerky. If I put this thing in and switch over to sport mode, it's not smooth, man. I mean, it's always hunting for gears. We're always skipping gears. It's downshifting. It's doing all kinds of weird crap, which I think would be great if it was nice, smooth, seamless transitions. But it's like, it almost feels like the darn thing's broken when you're driving around, and I've driven a couple of them, so I know that it's not my truck that's messed up. It's just a really odd setup. I mean, it's completely unnecessary. And I'm all for overhead. My entire life is overhead. Everything I have is more than what I need. But it's just, if I have the choice, I pick the 6-speed and the regular Raptor all day, every day. It's more predictable. I know what's going on, and not have this herky jerkiness. I'm already wanting to go back to regular mode, a regular normal drive mode. But it's just the whole hunt. And I'm driving around a flat road, so it's hunting for gears all the time, constantly. It's either in 10th gear, that's when it's comfortable. So when you're driving around 20 miles an hour, you're in 10th gear for some reason, and then it has to jerk around finding some other gear when you actually step on the gas. So that's a really clunky, really annoying thing. So one of my solutions was, why don't I just switch to manual mode? So I switched to manual. This has these fantastic aluminum paddles. Shoot, these paddles are nicer than the paddles in my GT3 RS. I love them. But and the gauge changes to a bigger center. It shows you M1, so we know we're in manual, manual 1, and we know which gear. But even then, the shift transitions are so slow and clunky. There's first, second. There's like a fourth to fifth is a really goofy transition. Then 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th are nice and smooth. So those middle gears are really clunky. Like it's just not a, you know, I'm cool with having it snap into gear or, you know, being very mechanical feeling, but it's just something about it. It's just really awful. It's just not good. You can shift here with the plus or minus, which is kind of odd. You know, like my GT3 RS, I push over, I can shift it like it's a manual gearbox, so I can take the lever, move it over, and boom, 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 shift gears, or I can use the paddles depending on what I'm up to. So I drove around for a week, you know, forced myself to drive around for a week in manual mode to get used to it. But it's kind of, I found it harder to make it intuitive, make it sort of come naturally because you're dealing with 10 gears. And, you know, and my assumption also, and I didn't track it, my assumption is that, you know, I'd probably drop 2-3 miles per gallon in fuel economy, which I don't really care as much about. If the experience was much better, you know, I'd be willing to sacrifice that, you know, $5 a month that it would cost me to do that. But it's just, there's too many gears to mess with. So this is just my experience as a dude in my truck. I'm not spouting off specs and things to you. This is just how it works, and it's clunky. Again, I'd pick the 6-speed all day, every day. I'd pick, obviously, the power of this. You know, the power delivery is good, I think, you know, outside of the herky-jerky transmission. But you know, I'd obviously choose the sound of the V8. See, we're in 6th gear. I'm going 28 miles an hour. 7th. Now we're in 10th. Going 32 miles an hour. So it's just odd. And if you put it in sport mode to keep the revs up a little bit higher, then it's, you know, the gear shifts are just really clunky. You know, they just click and clang into gear, and it's just, again, it's not something that I would prefer if I had the choice. The other annoyance of this thing is that it has the issue of the auto stop start being defaulted to on, and so you have to push the button to turn it off every time. That's another thing I'll probably code out here sooner rather than later. So there's the, you know, quick little driving experience difference. You know, I'll be sure to have more videos about this stuff over on my channel, Obsessed Garage. I'll probably be doing some more stuff here on Truck Central. But make sure to check out episode 2, where I go into a little more detail of the creature comforts and the difference in technology and interior differences between the two, you know, from my perspective. So make sure to check out that episode. Anyway, thanks for watching Truck Central. You'll check out obsessedgarage.com. And hope this me sharing the differences from my, you know, regular guy driving the Raptor to get groceries vantage point. So anyway, thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.